From the book of Mark, chapter 1, verses 40 through 45. A leper came to him, begging him and kneeling. He said to him, "If you choose, you can make me clean." Moved with pity, Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, "I do choose. Be made clean." Immediately, the leprosy left him, and he was made clean. After sternly warning him, he sent him away at once, saying to him, "See that you say nothing to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest and offer your cleansing what Moses commanded as a testimony to them." But he went out and began to proclaim it freely and to spread the word, so that Jesus could no longer go into a town openly, but stayed out in the country, and people came to him from every quarter.
The second healing story from the Hebrew scriptures, 2 Kings 5, 1-14. Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Aram, was a great man and a high favor with his master because by him the Lord had given victory to Aram. The man, though a mighty warrior, suffered from leprosy. Now, the Arameans, on one of their many raids, had taken a young girl captive from the land of Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my Lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." So Naaman went in and told his Lord just what the girl from the land of Israel had said. And the king of Aram said, "Go then, and I will send along a letter to the king of Israel." He went, and taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of garments. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, which read, "When this letter reaches you, know that I have sent to you my servant Naaman, that you may cure him of his leprosy."
And the story continues. When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, "Am I a god to give death or life that this man sends word to me to cure a man of his leprosy? Just look and see how he is trying to pick a quarrel with me." But when Elijah, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent a message to the king. "Why have you torn his clothes? Let him come to me, that he may learn that there is a prophet in Israel."
So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and halted at the entrance to Elisha's house. Elisha sent out a messenger to him, saying, "Go, wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean." But Naaman became angry and went away, saying, "I thought that for me, the great prophet himself would surely come out and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and would wave his hand over the spot and cure the leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?" He turned and went away in a rage.
But his servants approached and said to him, "Father, if the prophet had commanded you to do something difficult, would you not have done it? How much more when all he said to you was wash and be clean?" So he went down and immersed himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God. His flesh was restored like the flesh of a young boy, and he was clean.
The people say amen. Well, once upon a long ago Old Testament time, there lived a sick and desperate person named Naaman. Naaman had spent much of his life being the much feared commander of this very powerful nation's army. He had been a proud man of great wealth and stature. And somewhere along life's journey, this proud man of stature contracted leprosy. Yep, leprosy, that often incurable and for centuries the most dreaded of all diseases. Naaman probably got it sometime late in his career because having it from the start would have kept him from rising in the ranks. Lepers did not generally become commanders of armies. Lepers were considered unclean, unacceptable to God, unwelcome in the community. To even so much as barely touch a leper was to yourself become contaminated or unclean. And to complicate matters yet further, this big brass fighting man was considered the number one enemy of God's chosen people. It was he who had personally led conquered armies into Israel and had taken slaves from Israel, slaves back to Syria, including, and how ironic is this, the very little slave girl herself who recommended that he, when most desperate, seek healing among the very people he had so grievously harmed over and over again with his many raids. Don't we all, when we're sick enough or worried enough, tend to do whatever it takes? Both what professionals advise and what friends and acquaintances suggest. You know, take this pill, submit to that test, smoke that pipe, eat that mushroom, operate, investigate, get experimental meds at a border town. And even atheists pray the prayer Anne Lamott says is the most frequently uttered one in all the universe. Do you know which one that is? Help me, help me, help me. Though we can be led dangerously astray, I, for one, do ponder with gratitude the variety of healers who have come along at the right times in my own life. I'm reminded, for one, of Vernon Doc Kinsey, who was, when I was a child, in the 1950s and 60s, our family doctor, and the most revered person we knew up close. He was also a member of our church and often visited us in our own home. His wife, Geneva, taught us high school English literature, and was herself a licensed minister in the Church of the Brethren. From time to time, Geneva preached for our rural congregation. So she not only taught Shakespeare to us, she also showed us early on that women belong in the pulpit. And her husband, Doc, we called him, showed us early on that there was no contradiction whatsoever between modern medicine and a profound belief in God. When I went to Doc Kinsey for some childhood malady, I did so confidently. It wasn't that he was such a superior physician, but he was part of the extended family that was our church community, and we knew that he cared. We trusted him. We expected to get the very best he had to offer. Now, the only other doctor in town in our little tiny community was, when I was a child, was Doc Connors, who was, to quote my dad's rather judgmental and pejorative way of saying it, a drunkard. So given that we Church of the Brethren folks were ourselves often pejoratively referred to as dunkards, full immersion baptism, dunkards, it became the occasion and hopefully no one's offended, for my siblings and me to make up jokes about my dad's comparing of Doc Kinsey, the Dunkard, and Doc Connors, the drunkard. But when Doc Kinsey wasn't available, we would consult with Doc Connors. I asked Dad once how we could do that, given how negatively he was spoken of, and Dad said to me, well, Doc Connors is a pretty good bone doctor, even if he is a drunkard. And I gradually accepted it as fact that even the best of healers and heroes are only human. And even the weakest and most fallible among us have a role and a purpose in God's greater schema of things. Of course, most doctors we have dealings with nowadays are not people we are in community with particularly. They're not good friends. They are not fellow churchgoers most of the time. They work and generally live at some distance. They are professionals, which means they do highly specialized or technical procedures for pay, as opposed to amateurs. That word literally means lovers, ones who do things they do out of love. I've benefited greatly from highly specialized surgery, high-tech scans, and professional expertise. Don't get me wrong. These kinds of medical care are not always available in rural areas like that of my youth. So of course, I'm grateful for professional wisdom and advanced resources. They also know and need to know when I'm sick or feeling vulnerable that I'm loved. Don't we all? Bottom line, though, even back in Old Testament times, sick and desperate people do whatever they have to. So swallowing his pride, Naaman, the leper commander, sent a letter and fancy presents to the king of Israel, who Naaman had much humiliated in battle and had badly weakened. Naaman is begging him now for mercy. Again, how ironic. And it's an Israeli slave girl kidnapped into captivity by Naaman's own army, bringing the whole possibility to Naaman in the first place. So, upon receiving the letter, the poor king of Israel, in an agony of anxiety, rips his clothes into shreds. He thought his powerful enemy was trying to pick another fight. He thought he was being asked to do something impossible, some impossible favor, just to have an excuse to plunder and pillage his people even more. So the king of Israel said, "Am I a god to give life and death, that he sends a man to me to cure him of leprosy?" Well, it doesn't turn out to be the king. It is Elisha, an Israeli prophet, who says, in effect, "Let him come. This diseased enemy, untouchable, shall with God's help be healed." His healing will in fact be a first step toward reconciliation among warring peoples, the beginning of a new era of peace and of love. Think of Elisha as the Old Testament's own Martin Luther King Jr. or maybe Jimmy Carter. But the proud general Naaman didn't know, wasn't at all sure he wanted to trust. But the proud general Naaman didn't know and wasn't at all sure he wanted to trust the alleged healer prophet. Naaman would have presumed that he could not have loved him in the least. But Naaman is frantic about suffering and dying, so he goes to him anyway. So maintaining as grand a display of bravado as he could muster, Naaman went to the humble foreign abode of Elisha, and he pulled up with all his horses and chariots, and with abundant offerings of gold and silver, and wanting still to be the proud, prestigious military commander he once was, he waited upon his horse for Elisha to come out and meet him in person. And he waited and waited and waited some more, fearing utter humiliation, started to really squirm, only increasing his doubts about having come in the first place. And his resolve wavered yet further when Elisha had the effrontery to send out a little messenger boy. It was actually this boy, this pipsqueak nobody, who told General Naaman what he needed to do to be healed. Not Elisha, the great prophet. It was something almost insultingly ordinary, what he told him, too. The boy told him he needed to go take a bath. This subjugated nation's elderly soothsayer's little messenger boy was telling the high and mighty conquering war hero to march right down to the muddy, insignificant nearby river and take a bath. Man, that really teed off Naaman. If you've ever actually seen the Jordan River, has anyone? It's not a terribly impressive stream, at least not today. Naaman had marched his way to and through far more impressive rivers and streams than the Jordan. So feeling thoroughly insulted and mad as hell, he almost walked away from his only hope of getting healed. The cure seemed way too commonplace, too insultingly simple. It was as if he preferred to die proud right then and there, then shift his expectations that radically. Naaman might not have been sure as to how much to hope for, but at the very least, he expected a good show. A faith healer's song and dance, and all the high-tech special effects that could be marshaled for someone of his status and wealth. He said, why didn't he come out and wave his hands? Well, you know that type of preacher, right? Sort of doing it myself. Maybe all he ever dared to expect was theater to distract him from his pain. But he wasn't getting any of it. I think we tend to want magic too. We want high-tech gadgets. We want special effects. And sometimes we get them, and sometimes they do us some good. But what we don't do is adequately claim the healings that come along in ordinary, everyday ways. They're all around, people. We set the evidentiary bar so high for a miracle of healing, said one famous theologian, that a dozen miracles happen to us and we don't notice any of them. We don't want to pay attention to anything that doesn't have a whole lot of pizzazz. Lifeboats keep floating by and we don't get into any of them. We don't get into the ordinary, everyday miracles. When it comes to things miraculous, we're often just as snobbish as Naaman was. So I'd say this reluctance to claim the miracle kind of continues in Jesus' healing of the leper in today's New Testament story that Carrie read for us. Only this time the reluctance seems to be on the part of Jesus himself. The leper that Jesus heals wants to spread the word far and wide, and one would think that a good thing. But Jesus strictly tells him not to tell of it. Jesus wants to draw back from making a big display of his power. Why? Why? Is it that people need to live through illness, weakness, and even despair before being trusted with the fullness of God's miraculous power? Would any of us stick around to hear the whole story of who Jesus is, if healing miracles came a dime a dozen. I think that Jesus keeps his more flashy potential for miracles at a minimum on purpose, reminding us once again that we are the body of Christ, that we are the dispensers even of everyday miracles, that we can and must do as he did, that is, touch one another with healing love. The leper said, Jesus, if you choose, you can heal me, make me whole. The one who was considered untouchable said this. And we can say with Jesus, I do so choose. I may wear a mask, but I will touch, be made whole. We can say that to one another. Maybe what we're most in need of is healing of our own limited expectations. If we're so convinced that an ordinary swim in an ordinary river can't heal us, or the mere touch can't make us better, then of course it can't. But as adults, we come to faith after having been through the fires of life and of the equivalent of leprosy, after having experienced real disillusionment, real cancer, real struggle, real addiction, real grief. It is only after some share of those kinds of experiences that we come to faith in a way that is less naive, in a way that has guts and depth, in a way that moves us beyond our own very individual and personal pain and suffering. I like the poet Mary Oliver's simple instructions for living a life. She says, pay attention, be astonished, tell about it. And that's what both Naaman and the leper that Jesus healed did in fact do. They paid attention, they were astonished, and they told about it. Go in peace, Elisha tells that career warrior, that lifelong military man. Just think how thick-skinned that man must have been. Here he was walking away with the soft skin of a little child, able for the first time to simply be amazed and astonished, able to jump up in the air again, dance and cry for joy, able to finally lay down the sword and shield used against the ones he is now so gratefully indebted to. Go in peace, Naaman, even you, maybe especially you, who have gone warring so long inside and outside. And having sought, you now have found. Having asked, you have been given. Having knocked, the door has been opened. And that astonishing love of God coming in and through your callous but not impenetrable skin to make you well and whole and wholly loved. May it be so for the world and for us all in every generation, again and again and again. Amen.